Hey Tech Gurus, welcome back. This is lesson 11. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at reading and writing files in Python, including JSON files. And up to this point, we've done a lot, but we've done everything on a small scale. We've written small lists, we've written small dictionaries and manipulated them. But now we're going to get into opening very large amounts of data using external files and also saving to files as well. So let's just jump right in so I can show you how to open and manipulate external files with Python. So what I thought we could do to start here, I'm here in our Jupyter notebook. So I've got this file here that I've created called Disney Rides. Okay, it's just a text file. And this file has line by line all the different rides inside of either Disneyland or California Adventure. Okay, I thought it'd be fun. All right. So what I want to do in Python is I want to open up and manipulate this file. So this file is called Disney Rides. And this file is residing in my C temp folder because I'm on Windows. Okay, so C temp. So let's open up and take a look at this file using Python. To open up, we are going to create a with block, and it's going to look like this: with open, and then the file path of the file. In this case, I am in C temp, and this is called Disney Rides. And this file, by the way, is available in the description. You can download and use it if you'd like. Okay. .text. All right. As, and we can call it whatever we want. I'm just going to call it file. And then let's make a variable called contents, and contents will equal file.read. So it's going to use the method read to read the contents of the file, and then we can print the contents. I'm going to hit Control Enter. All right, cool. So that goes through that file and it returns all the results of that file for us in Python. So it actually pulled the file into memory, into contents, and then we printed the contents of the file. Now, what is the with block? So the with allows Python. Notice that we have an open function here, but we do not have a close. The with block will allow Python to go through the file and then open and then close the file when it's no longer needed to be executed upon. Okay, so instead of having to manually open and then later find the right place to close the file, which could result in errors, we just use a with block, and then Python knows when to close the file after we're done with it. Okay, so that's what this code is doing. It's opening the disneyrides.txt file, and then we're getting the contents, and we're printing the contents out. Okay, now what if we want to read this file line by line? And let me give you an example of why we might want to do this. Maybe what we want to do is, using the Disneyland file, we want to pull out all the content that's only relevant to California Adventure. So we're going to go line by line and only pull out each line if it says California Adventure in the line. All right. So very similar to what we did up here, we are going to do with open again, and I'm just going to copy this first part. As file, okay, and then what we can do is for line in file, so going through each line, if California Adventure is in line, then print the line. All right, let's run this. Awesome. It worked. So it's gone through every single line of the file. And if California Adventure was in the line, then it printed it. Otherwise, it discarded, right? Because we didn't write any kind of an else statement. So that worked. That went through each line by line, right? Now notice how it's forced an empty line into each of these. It does that by default. You can get rid of that by running the rstrip method on the string. Essentially, it's stripping out white space to the right of a string. And if you do that, then you run it, it collapses everything without a space. So very cool. That's how you can go line by line. And we already are using Python for something efficient. In this case, we modified the file to only show us relevant information for California Adventure. So very cool. All right, what about reading line by line outside of the with block? So in this solution, we have to keep all of the relevant code within the with block so it knows to open it and then discard this file once it's done. Well, we can also do this. We are going to still use this with open as file. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable called lines, and if lines will equal file.read lines. Okay. What that does is it now created a variable that we can use externally outside of this block. So it will do this, go line by line into a variable called lines, creating a list, okay, that we can use later. And then it will close the file because we no longer need it. And then down here, we can use lines. So we can use for line in lines, just like we did above. For line in lines. Okay. Let's do the same thing. If California Adventure, then print. Okay, let's try it. We get the exact same results, except for in this solution down here, we don't have to keep the with block open. We can do what we need to, get the contents of the file into a variable called lines in an array, each line containing essentially an index in the array, and then we can loop, or we can go through each line looking for the same thing. So very cool. That's how you can do that outside of the with block. And that works. All right. So we've read a file. Now, how do we write to a file? Okay, let's take a look at that. So to write to a file is very, very similar. We are going to use with open, and we're going to actually, to make this easier, let's do this. Let's create a file name variable. And let's call this, I'm going to point to my temp directory, and I'm going to create a new file name, a name that actually does not exist already. And I'm going to call this California Adventure.txt. I want to go and store the results that I've already received of just California Adventure related writes into a new file called californiaadventure.txt for text. So to do that, I do with open, okay, and then I do file name. I need two parameters in this case. I need the file name and the W for write mode. So I'm going to open this file with write privileges. Okay, now keep in mind, this file doesn't even exist right now. It will create it for me. But we can open a file in read mode, R, which by default, it opens a file in just read mode, which it did up here for us, right here. You can open a file in write mode, which we're doing now, which opens the file and allows you to write to it. Append mode, which will allow you to open a file and write to the end of the file and keeping all the previous contents, where write file essentially overwrites the entire file, clearing everything out and starting new. So append will append to the previous contents of the file. And read and write mode allows you to write and read to the file at the same time. So we're opening a file called California Adventure. We're writing to this file. We'll call this as file. Okay. And then what we can do is just as we did up here for line and lines. Let's use that again. Great, so for line and lines, if California Adventure exists, then let's write it to the file, okay? So to do that, we do file.write and the line. So it's going to go through, and it's actually going to write to this file several times, but it will write a line for each time that it finds California Adventure in that file. So let's do that. I want to show you, before I do that, if I open this up, I do not have a file right now called California Adventure. Okay, so let's run this. All right, it doesn't show that anything happened, but if I show you over here, I now have a file here called californiaadventure.txt. If I open that up, check it out. I have a file now only containing those California Adventure rides. Very cool. So did I not only use Python to manipulate my original Disney rides file, I now was able to write out the results that I needed to a new file that I can give to anybody I need to. So that's great. So that is how you write to a new file. All right, so let's look at another example of data manipulation using a really large data set. In this case, I'm going to use a file here which is in public domain. It's Treasure Island, so it's the entire book of Treasure Island. What I want to do is I want to load this file in, and I want to see how many times the word treasure occurs in the book Treasure Island. So how do we do this? Okay, well, let's first get the file name. ctemp treasure island.txt. Okay, and then what I want to do is load that file in. We're going to open file name. Let's load it as book, and then let's get the contents of that book. So we're going to book.read loads that into contents, because what I thought might be interesting was once we do that, let's create a variable called words. Let's see how many words are in this book first. To do that, we're going to use contents.split. When we split like this, it just splits basically words apart. So now we have a variable called words, which is the entire book of Treasure Island in a list, essentially, so we can count how many words there are, because I can print the length of words. Let's see how many words there are. Oops. See, now this is interesting. This is something I actually do want to show you. We've received this error, and this error is a decoding error, saying that it can't properly decode the book, the text file we've given it. This might occur sometimes, and if this happens, you can use a second variable, a parameter called encode. And we are going to encode in UTF-8. Okay, and this now should allow us to encode correctly. Let's try it again. Okay. Sorry, it's encoding. I apologize. Okay, it worked. Encoded the book correctly, and then we have words, and then it printed the number of words, which was 71,616 words in this file. Cool. That's helpful, but we want to know how many times does the word treasure explicitly occur in the book. So now we have our words in a list. Count words. We'll start at 0, and then for word in words, if word is equal to, actually, and you know what I'm going to do? If word.lower is equal to treasure, that way If we have a case sensitivity issue, it's not relevant. So if the lowercase version of word is equal to lowercase version of treasure, then let's count words plus equal 1. So we're going to increment count words by 1, okay, if that happens. And then all we have to do with this case is print count words. There we go. So we can see that there are a total, the total length of words is 71,616. And the total amount of times that the word treasure occurs in the book is 37. So very cool. It works. And that's a really quick way that we were able to analyze a large amount of data very, very quickly. So very cool. Last thing I want to show you is how to load and save JSON data. JSON data in particular is very useful because it is a portable data format that can be used across almost any programming language. And that makes it very helpful when either loading and saving files in Python or loading files from Python to other languages as well. So what does something like that look like? Well, I thought what might be kind of fun is to create an application that stores data in JSON, checks to see if that data exists, and if it does, we do something. If it doesn't, then we do something else. So what I was thinking we could do here is, first thing we need to do is we need to import our JSON library to use some of our JSON functions, and then create a file name. Let's create a file name again in my temp folder called, I call this userlist.json. Okay, I'll show you what I'm going to do with this file in just a second. Then I want to ask the user for their name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the user for their name. If they've given us their name before, I'm going to welcome them back. Otherwise, I'm going to store their name as a JSON object in a JSON file that's going to be saved and retrieved. So name, we're going to ask input, what is your name? Okay, so we have a file name, we have a name variable, and then to prevent any errors, we need to create an empty JSON file with an empty list. Now, there are ways to do this through error checking, but we haven't done that yet. So to do this, all you need to do is I'm going to create a new text file. I'm going to call this userlist.json. And I'm going to create an empty list, or in this case for JSON, an empty array. Okay, so there we go. We have this file user list, and again, all it is an empty array. Open close brackets. All right. So we have an empty JSON file. And again, we're only doing that for this example because we haven't done anything with looking for file not found errors, just to keep it more simple. All right, so let's do this. Let's open that file as this is our read portion. So again, it can be anything you want, but let's open that file as a read. And let's assign the contents of that file to a new variable called user list. So to do that, we do a json.load read. Okay. That will open the file and load it into a variable called user list. To show you that this is working, I can actually print that user list now. Oh. Okay, something else. If you get this error, it's giving me this error on trying to use file name. This has to do with Windows file name formats, paths. You can force this to just be a raw string by putting an R in front of it, and that should solve your problem. There we go. So if I type Tyler, down here it prints, here's my empty user list. This is what exists in that JSON file right now. So we created a new variable called user list. Okay, it is working. It loaded the JSON file in. So let's do this. If name that I provide is in user list, then we are going to print welcome back and the name. Okay, and we can do this by putting an F in front of the string. This is just like adding dot format name at the end. We're just using F at the beginning, and you put the variable name in curly brackets. So welcome back name. That's if the name is in the user list. Okay, alrighty. Else, if it's not in the user list, let's append their name to the user list that we got from the JSON file. Then let's save it back to the file name. This time, remember, we have to have write permissions, as we'll call this write because we called the previous one read. And we need to do what's called a json.dump. And it takes two parameters and arguments. It takes the user list, the data we want to put into the file, and write from here, the actual instance of this write object. Okay? So we're going to do that if the name they gave us is not currently in the JSON file. And then we can print thanks name. I will remember for next time. All right, and again, we need to make sure that we put an F so we format the name correctly. And that should work. So let's see what happens. I'm going to run it. I'm going to add Tyler. Okay, it says, thanks, Tyler. I'll remember you for next time. Let's see if that really worked. I'm going to run it again and type in Tyler again. Welcome back. It remembered. Let's do it again. Let's do it for Susan. Thanks, Susan. I'll remember you next time. And Susan again. Welcome back. How cool is that? How about Bob? Thanks. I'll remember you next time. Very cool. Now what if I type in Tyler again? It still remembers. It's seen me before. So how is it doing this? Well, if I go back and I open up this user list file here that we were generating, and I edit it, look, it's putting and appending those values in every time it receives a name it hasn't received before. How cool is that? So that is a great example of us using JSON to both load and save a file in a simple application. So very cool stuff. So I hope all of this has made sense. It's been really fun to do. In the future, we're going to be looking at how to manipulate massive amounts of data, especially for things like data analysis. So this is just the beginning of that. So I look forward to working with you in future lessons, and I'll see you there.